Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of this week's Food Forest Tours. Glad you're here. This right here is a table grape, or so I thought it was, that I planted against this tree right here. I'm thinking it was about 4 or 5 years ago, if I'm remembering right. And I was thinking, or at that time, I was growing all of my grapes on the trellises that you've seen. And so I had this one extra, and I figured, well, instead of just throwing it away, I'll just stick it over here. At the time, this bush actually wasn't here, so I'm thinking it's closer to the probably 5-year range, just based on the size of this privet bush. But they do grow crazy fast, so it was probably 4 or 5 years maybe. But anyway, so this grape has grown up and just grown throughout this privet, using it as a natural trellis. It has been really healthy, and this year it looks like it's doing really well and kind of competing right with the privet to grow right along its edge right here. This is kind of the sunnier side. It's moved into over there. It gets sun from this direction too a lot. It's grown way up there. You can see a few grape leaves, and it's got quite a few right here on the tips that are producing some grapes, and the clusters look really interesting. I had I think maybe like 2 or 3 grapes last year, and they were really interesting. They looked like a red table grape would look, and they tasted pretty good if I'm remembering correctly. And let's see, go up to another cluster. There's 2 right there, one right here, and one right up there. As you can see, they kind of look like a hybrid of a table grape and a muscadine, which I'm thinking it may be, or it may be like a table grape cross with like some other type of wild grape, as they're in more like the clusters seem to kind of break off a little bit more than a normal table grape would. So it's really interesting to see how they looked and tasted last year, and I could tell it may have not been a full kind of normal taste last year, but it tasted pretty decent. And the thing that was really interesting about them was the skin. The skin was tough, but not like a muscadine where it's kind of crunchy and got a good, like, well balancing kind of tart taste to the inside that's sweet. It was more like a super strong papery texture, if that kind of makes sense. But I couldn't even chew it up. It was so thin but tough, and I had to just kind of, when I bite into it, the insides would kind of, or at least what was in the middle, would kind of come out, and it would just kind of leave the skin that I couldn't chew up in my mouth, so you just spit it out. But I remember it being decent, so it looks like there's quite a few clusters on here, and it's getting bigger. Got lots of some new growth right here and some new growth right here coming out on the privet. So looks like I will hopefully get to test it again this year, and maybe the skin thing was just a one-time thing due to something weird last year, but I'm probably sure it's gonna be a thing each time. You can see some new growth coming out right there. But yeah, this one should be really interesting and hopefully the animals will stay off it so I can taste it and have a few. This apple right here is finally starting to fill in. Got lots of new growth right down there. Starting to come out at the tops too, so that one's looking really good. This is the European plum that was, I'm sorry, no, this isn't that one. The fencing though looks like fell off of this one, and as you can see, the deers kind of got the tips right there and like the tips on these 2 branches, but the top growth looks like hasn't been munched on, so that's really good. You can tell the newest growth by those really red leaves. And then right down here, this kind of vigorous branch coming out from the bottom is looking really good too, and that was untouched by the deer, so thankfully they left a few without totally munching off all the new growth buds. This apple right here is looking really good. Got about 6 inches at least of new growth right here. Starting to send out some, looks like maybe new branches along the main shoot, And those red leaves that were there is finally starting to just, I think they naturally, it's like a bug actually got to them probably, and they're naturally just starting to break down and fall off, and the new tip is growing out from the top. You can see, I don't think I mentioned the cool weather crops growing, but that is a ton of lettuce right down there, and there's some beets and peas. See if I can drop down and get a good view close up of them. All right, so there is lettuce, beets, and peas. I think that's everything in this particular one. You can see some peas kind of in that middle right shot right there. They're starting to get about 2 or 3 inches of growth on them. The lettuce is just growing like crazy, tons of it, and I'm not gonna do anything to it but just pick it, and so it's super easy. So far it's doing really good, and my previous experience with lettuce is it'll just continue to thicken up and thicken up, and it can be cut to be thinned out for the lesser or weaker growing ones that aren't growing as well, so that you keep the strongest ones so that they can make more really healthy lettuce. And I think there's some beets coming up in there too, and everything is looking really good, and I'm pretty much just gonna leave it just like this and harvest tons of, hopefully, vegetables from it. This is a newer mound, kind of connecting mound, as I mentioned, like kind of ridges between, like there's the tree we're just looking at, the apple tree, and then this is another apple over here beside it. There's a pool, of course, in the background. But on this ridge, you can see I've planted it with some summer crops so far, and so far I've done some okra and some beans. You can see some of the beans right there. That's a cucumber seed actually, I think, yeah. And it looks like the root, I can see the root coming out. You can see it's coming out. We've had some good rain this past week. They were planted about a week ago, so they will probably be coming up very shortly. And squash is the other thing I planted. There's a squash seed right there. It looks like it's washed in. Oh, there's a cucumber sprouting actually. You can see the seed right there on it. I didn't even step on it or firm up the beds. I just tossed pretty quickly, probably too quickly. But no, really, I just take the seed and kind of just take a handful or a good size handful and kind of just lightly scatter it across with each different type. And so it's looking really good so far. We're excited to see that cucumber sprouting up. So that's really encouraging, and I'm still building some more of these, connecting until I get all of them done. That will have a I was looking at, that's a future fruit tree mound. I was thinking that was a really long ridge right there, but so they will all be planted out with the extra seed, and if I have extra with the remaining seed, going on the newly built ones, and the extra, I'll come back and just kind of do the same thing over again, scattering them and sowing them as thickly as possible. But really glad to see that coming up, and hopefully they will be doing really good, like the lettuce and the peas and the beets and the cool weather crops. So excited to see them doing good. This is the apple right beside that was the mound with the little cucumber coming up. And this one is, it's kind of interesting. This branch right here is a little bit shorter than the main branch right here. And this one seems super healthy. Nothing, interesting going on with it. This one, however, it also looks super healthy, but it also has some aphids on it. And as you can see, they are really thick right there. And I am gonna do absolutely nothing about it. And you can see, over to our right, the main protagonist, some type of ladybug, is probably gonna be laying their eggs right near here. It's probably chowing down actually on some of those. There's some aphids right here, if I can get it, there we go, to focus. And so it's probably having its lunch, and will probably be hopefully laying some eggs also, and which will the larvae, when they hatch, will probably voraciously feed on these aphids and help to balance it out and to get them off the tree with absolutely doing nothing, just leaving it and allowing it. By having all of this diverse stuff growing, it provides feed for the ladybugs and cover for them to hide and places for them to take shelter in. So I had the same thing happen on one of my other apple trees. I think it was actually this one back here, but it looked like it was having some aphid stuff going on, and the next thing I knew, it had a bunch of ladybug larvae just chowing down on the aphids. So, and as it probably adjusts and this soil becomes more healthy right here, the plant will probably just naturally fend off the aphids. So really excited to see that. Going over here to the other apple tree. This one's looking really good with some of these new shoots. It looks like it has something at the tip maybe that had some damage, maybe from a bug or something else, but if that tip shoot right there dies, this one will probably become the main leader shoot and come up right there and replace it. So really excited to see that. You can see up on the top of the mound, the soil before I planted, I had kind of tamped down to just firm it around the tree. So when I planted the seeds, it was already like that and kind of firm. So a lot of the seed didn't hold tight to as much, kind of stick to the soil, I guess, up near around the tree, and a lot of it kind of washed down into all the little crevices. So you can see it's really nice to have just a lot of, just where I would toss shovelfuls of soil and just leave it, and they kind of accumulated in the little valleys and open craters for the majority. So they're doing really good, and hopefully have a lot of yummy lettuce to pick for our own salad soon. Thanks for tuning into part 4 of this week's Food Forest Tours. I'll see you guys in part 5 soon. Bye guys.